So we're recording. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Jolie Angel Robinson. I am the chair of this illustrious and fantastic working group of individuals who have been brought together. Wasn't that nice? Wasn't that a nice introduction of you all? So since we're a nice, small enough, intimate enough group, we're just going to go around the table starting over here, introduce ourselves, and we just want to hear who else is in the audience as well.
Hi, I'm Coy Murchison, and I served on the Mayor's Task Force for Confederate Monuments, and so I wanted to be on the first group because I thought it was important to not just suggest certain things, but actually be involved in them coming to fruition.
Hi, I'm John Rollins. I'm an architect here in Dallas and have been the architect for a number of projects in Fair Park, as well as some other historic preservation, historic restoration projects.
I'm sorry, I'm just making sure that we're recording. I'm Kay Callis, I'm the Public Art Program Manager for the City of Dallas.
I'm Jennifer Scripps, I'm the Director of the Office of Cultural Affairs. The Office of Cultural Affairs has been the staff office working on all of these Confederate and monument and historic preservation issues.
Good, thank you. I'm Jolie Angel Robinson. My day job, I manage community engagement for the Dallas Police Department. I was originally one of the mayor's appointees on the task force for, or commission, what were we officially?
We were a
task force, right? For the Confederate monuments, the first go around. And so I'm happy to be joined by some of my friends and colleagues who were on the previous task force as well. Yes.
I'm Craig Holcomb, and actually I know everyone out there, so y'all can just remember me as you want to remember me.
Buddy Apple, I am on the board of Preservation Dallas, and I was also the District 1 appointee to the Mayor's Task Force.
Perfect. Well, we wanted to kind of set tonight's tasks in context, and since so many of our working group members were on the original task force, it makes it easy. The original task force made recommendations that the images related to the Confederacy in Fair Park and much of the history of Fair Park had not been properly memorialized. The Hall of Negro Life was discussed, the integration of the State Fair. Obviously there are Confederate images on the Esplanade and in this building. And we felt like the task force said, don't take them down if they're up, don't take anything down, but really add to the story. And so when this group started meeting, we felt like there was a need to engage the community and try to find out what stories we might have been missing, which is what prompted this event. And there'll be another one on Saturday, May 4th at 10 a.m. at the African American Museum. So I know we're in the middle of Hamilton and it's a beautiful night, so if you're thinking, well, this isn't a huge group, please get your friends, neighbors, colleagues out on that Saturday morning as well, because there's multiple opportunities. So with that, I'm going to talk about the invitation to speak.
Right, and so to add another note, I'm also the co-chair of Dallas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation efforts here in Dallas. And part of those efforts have to do with truth-telling and narrative change. And so if you know the full name of our working group here, it's the recontextualization of Fair Park history and a memorial to the victims of lynching here in Dallas County. And so our charge is twofold as a working group, and we've had conversations around what that should look like moving forward. But the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation model really starts with truth. And so that is why, as Jennifer mentioned, these listening sessions and really getting community input is important and vital for us to understand whose story. We can sit in a room with our fellow working group members and hash it out, but it's important because we're telling the history of Dallas, and we want to be sure that we are casting a wide net for those voices and those individuals and those stories that need to be included and have not been intentionally and unintentionally left out of our history. We want to ensure that we're having those listening sessions to open it up. So we have an opportunity for those individuals to speak. Has anybody that wanted to speak had a chance to sign up to speak? I want to be sure that we're not leaving anyone out. So we're going to keep it no more than 5 minutes since we have 3 people that have signed up. So you'll have a chance to speak. You're not speaking this year? Okay.
And we are recording it, just...
So I think that leaves Mr. Ed and Mr. Philip Collins to speak. This is kind of our podium here. Again, you have 5 minutes. Since it's not a lot of people, if you go to 10 minutes, I don't mind. I'll cut you off eventually, but we have plenty of time. And of course, when we think about those marginalized communities whose voices weren't included, we are thinking about the African American story, we're thinking about our Native brothers and sisters, we're thinking about our Mexican American brothers and sisters here, who may have enjoyed the park, and any others who may have had history here in Fair Park that we need to be including in as we recontextualize that. So I will get started. First speaker, Mr. Ed. Mr. Ed?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Looks like Kay is making a move to help us with that.
I think there's 10 of you here, so there's 10 in each of these.
Okay.
This is the second. So, in email conversations with Professor John Moran Gonzalez, he's the director of the Center for Mexican American Studies at the University of Washington, and he gave me this quote: "As built for the centennial, Fair Park was indeed instrumental in concretizing a narrative of triumphant white supremacy, one that equates progress with the advancement of whites and the necessary subjugation of black and brown." And Dr. Gonzalez makes it very clear in his book, Border Renaissance, how this is affected, how this is done, and the Texas Centennial. And he says, what the Centennial did was articulate all these mythological elements within a coherent narrative of Anglo-Saxon racial progress that shaped the representational contours of modern Texas, the Texas today. Much of the construction of prejudice occurred in the Centennial. After discussing the racism faced by African Americans, the construction of the Negro Hall of Life Estates. In contrast, the Mexican American community had no specific exhibit, no contemporary living presence at the Centennial exhibition in Dallas, but nonetheless occupied a central, if despised, place within Centennial discourses. He also explains the Centennial is extremely unpopular in Mexico because of the derogatory nature. Gerald Fields, he's a continuing lecturer in architecture, Department of Architecture at the University of California, Berkeley. And he has a book, Architecture, Black Theory, Space, and Appearance. It discusses the white supremacy of Hegel and its relationship to architecture. It explains how Hegel set up the black subject as a thing in opposition to historical progress. And if you look at the pictures here, you can basically see out there in the Hall of State a very Hegelian representation of African Americans' position within the entire Fair Park thing. I've actually done a couple thousand photographs of all the artwork, and African Americans do not do anything. White people do everything. And they are the static people just toting bales of hay. It's not surprising that, Aaron Douglas's The Negro Hall of Life was torn down. 2 of Aaron Douglas's murals were destroyed because this picture, Aspirations, represents the thematic opposite of that. So I'd like to conclude with Dallas needs to stop avoiding its white supremacist past by sweeping under the rug. It needs to stop trying to represent nostalgia as history to cover up this white supremacist past. To deny the Texas Centennial and its architecture and artwork as Dallas' own Texas triumph of will is to collude with this white supremacy. It is morally equivalent to Holocaust denial. And if you look at the bibliography, I'm just going to briefly speak to it. As I got into it, I found out this isn't just a thing here. It's 1930s. Art Deco exhibitions are being constructed all over the world, and they all relate to construction of narratives to support white supremacy. And what I did particularly notice is one that's done simultaneously with the Texas Centennial as Empire exhibit in 1936 in South Africa in Johannesburg. You probably can't see the picture of this, but sort of looks like our Fair Park, doesn't it?
At first
And
I
I
thought it
just
was.
got this in the mail 30 minutes before I had to leave here, or 15 minutes. But I'm going to be continuing to do this. And I think that we need, the Confederate stuff is just one part of a larger system. And just to put a little plaques and not acknowledge the larger system will look really foolish, and also it doesn't make us a modern city. It's like some rural city that doesn't want to deal with stuff. Like White Settlement and their Texas Civil War Museum. Remember that? So I would ask that you consider it. I've also started to connect academics across the nation to form some type of action to make sure this is not swept on the rug. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Can you stay just for a couple of questions though, if we just want clarifying questions?
Sure.
Okay, so, I just want to be sure I'm boiling down kind of what your thoughts are. You're advising us to acknowledge the larger narrative that has been left out and consider more than just a plaque or some of the other stories and histories that have not been included, correct?
No, when you contextualize the Confederate stuff, it's part of a larger narrative. It makes no sense unless your contextualization acknowledges Dr. Gonzalez's writings
Okay.
and other people's writings.
Agreed, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'll tell you, just to give you context to my answer, I visited Baltimore and photodocumented all the contextualization monuments there. It's hilarious. And so I think there's real risk here. And it's evidently, this place has been a concern in Mexican American studies for quite some time.
Thank you for all
Thank
the
you.
preparation.
That was really helpful. Really helpful. Thank you so much. Mr. Philip Collins, and I know we had a couple of people walk in afterwards. We're at a point where if you wanted to speak, there's a sign-up sheet here. We're giving anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to speak, to share your thoughts about what we are here to do. Our working group again is recontextualization. Come on up, sir. Come on up. Of the Fair Park Memorial around the Confederacy. I know with our working group, we had a centennial, non-centennial conversation. And so at our last meeting, we are thinking not just about the centennial time frame, but the entire time frame of Fair Park and the history and the histories that have been left out of Fair Park. And so I know we talked a little bit about the centennial with our first speaker, but just for everyone's clarity, we're not just thinking about the centennial exhibit, but we're thinking prior to and even after that, and how we're including or not including those histories. Yes, sir.
Okay, just following up on what Mr. Sylvester was talking about there, with relationship to the Museum African American Life and Culture, History and Culture, the significance of A. Maceo Smith in the development of that should be noted. He was responsible for that building getting there in the beginning. It was refused by the city. Well, the city denied I should not say denied the funding for it. He was in charge of the Black Chamber of Commerce here, Negro Chamber of Commerce, pardon me, that's what you put it in context there. And he went to the city to ask for the African American community to participate in this. And the city was excited that they wanted to participate, but unfortunately, they did not have the funds in their budget for them to participate. And so he went to the state, down to Austin, the same story. He left the state, well, for the same story, he went to D.C., to the State Department. And that building was the result of $50,000 that was given to him by the state of the United States State Department. It's a very interesting story. I wrote an article on it in Art Lives years ago.
Okay.
It's been published. But it should be noted that the building was taken down after the centennial celebration thing, because the city decided that Dallas needed a new with a public swimming pool. And that building was replaced by a swimming pool at the time.
And it wasn't even a new brown swimming pool, it was the above ground swimming pool, kind of the cheapest they
Right.
could do.
I think that was
Had to go
the
with
justification for removing it all. And then along comes desegregation of Dallas schools and public facilities and all. And then the city decided that the music hall needed to expand its parking lot because of the development of its crowd, its track, the audience development there. And they needed more space. So, swimming pool, that we received. The parking lot expansion. Now, how the African American Museum got there, the new is through the homework of Dr. Harry Robinson. He knew of this story in one, and it was developed from there. And there's an interesting little part that I'd like to share with you about that. When I came on board, I was the chief curator there at the African American Museum when it came to Fair Park, and the building was there. And there was a George Smith sculpture that was donated to the museum called Nomo. And Nomo is the god of water. It's a mythological god, you know, and the deity of the Africans of Mali. And this piece is an abstract piece, and it's on the parking lot side of the museum. It's installed there, facing the museum. And Nomo is a figure that leans forward, maybe when you see it in the wood sculpture, with his hands directed toward the heavens, demanding that it rains, because the Mali culture is an agricultural culture. And this was a metaphor for the museum to flourish and grow. And that's why Nomo is standing there. That was purposely put there for that. That's why you see that strange looking piece in front of the museum as you enter there on the parking lot side. But the interesting part of that is when I installed that piece, we hit the swimming pool.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
We have shards in the collection there of the swimming pool there at the African American Museum. So, for the records, Nomo is emerging from the swimming pool.
Are you saying
Thank
Noma?
Thank you.
Is it Noma?
The name of the god of
Is that you saying Noma? I heard Nova or Noma.
Nomo, N-O-M-N-O.
Okay.
Two N's, N-O-M-M-O.
Okay.
Nomo.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We're scratching notes,
I
right?
know. That's an awesome story.
So, I mean, it's stories like that, it's stories that were shared from Mr. Ed. So thank you for all the hard work that we're trying to ensure that we're including in our processes as we move forward. And so if, as Jennifer mentioned before, we have a follow-up meeting on Saturday, May 4th from 10 to 11 at the African American Museum. We want to include more community voices and perspectives we can have, and research is being done. We have a lot of people that have been a part of the working group and in our meetings that have a really strong historical background that can help us understand how we can include those different voices in our history as we move through this process. But it is absolutely important for us as we go through the process that our community members that have a rich history and a rich knowledge of everything that has happened here, not only in Dallas, but specifically on the Fair Park grounds, that we are including those voices in whatever the end product looks like. And so for that Saturday, May 4th, not only the voices that need to be included, but what might it look like as we move forward? Is it a walking tour that has information people can log into a link and get those histories? So that's what our whole purpose is this evening. Anything else from us? Anyone else? Questions, comments?
Just one little addition to the Saturday tour. The Friends of Fair Park will host a tour of Fair Park, so you can do a trolley tour before the 10 o'clock listening session, if you want to come and do that.
What time, Kim?
8:30.
What day is that?
Saturday, the 4th of May. And I have flyers right here if you want to take one with you. It will be posted on Facebook, on our website, and sent out through a variety of means through the city of Dallas.
Anything else? Questions? Questions from the audience? Anybody have questions? Yes, sir.
Is that date a firm date already?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
Because that's election day. Yes. And that is also, for the Latino community, you know, it's Cinco de Mayo weekend. And so there's all these ethnic celebrations. The input, I think, from the Hispanic community, the Latino community, is very important in this. I always feel that there's just never enough of our voice here in these type of meetings. Before everybody got here, I went around the table and I looked at to see who was going to be here, and I did see Albert's name up there. Unfortunately, he's not here, and I will call him to see, maybe he could have sent somebody or.
I mean, and he's been extremely active as we've been meeting over the months, doing his own history about Mexican American Day at Fair Park and what that looked like and the different acts that may have been brought in and even the history of why that day started.
Sure.
And so he's really been helpful and has been talking to the trainees of our city of Dallas about what that history was, kind of getting a firsthand knowledge of what that day may have looked like here for Fair Park.
And I know he's part of the Dallas Mexican American Historical Society
Exactly.
as well.
Is that how you heard about this event?
No, I heard it through the Eco Latino
Okay.
thing. I had heard about it, but I was interested also to come in and find out what the Hispanic community was contributing to this. So I guess I'll have a conversation with him regarding it. My concern about the date, that's what I was asking, was because it is an election day. So everyone's going to be out, either at the polls or getting people to the polls. And,
We'll add another day.
just
No skin off our back. We are the working group, and we set these dates, these 2 dates, so we'll just add another day. Sound good? So when we add that other date, we'll publish it like we publish all the other ones. Please, please, please ensure that, those that you're connected to know that this is an opportunity to be heard and be included in the conversation from the ground up, right? We're really doing all that we can as a working group to ensure that we're not even contained in our own silo of history and legacy, but that we know that our Mexican American brothers and sisters here in the city of Dallas really helped to build what our city is today and are continuing to do that. And so we're taking our blinders off as well.
It is pretty bad that no one in the city thought that was election day, though, isn't it? You're clearly.
I'm an early voter, so.
Me too. We were clearly in execution mode.
I'm an early voter, so usually I don't even remember.
No, fair point. No, we can add another one.
I would suggest, because this is embarrassing, that in any more publicity or print material even, we say,
Yeah.
don't forget to vote
Before you come.
before or after.
Or after, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an early voter too, so.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Do we want to talk about that next date then? That works for you guys?
He had his
Okay,
hand
sorry,
up.
okay.
Yeah, I want to finish.
Hi, my name is Jose Rivas. I came because I found out about this event on Facebook. My initial position was just to come in here and observe and see what the discussion is going to be about. I can't agree more about diversifying our history and how it's projected to the citizens of our city. That being said, I know that we all, and at least it's my opinion, that we all like to try and make up for things that have happened in the past by building new things that, whether it's a statue or a fountain or whatever it is. What I'm asking for and just my take on it is, I think it would be great is if we blended our history into the fabric of the city and the state. So just like you have things out here with Lamar on it, or Hogg, or the governors and the senators that put this state together and these cities together, I think that there are major contributions that have been made by African Americans and Hispanics, like Seguin and, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at African American history, but from my perspective, I think it would be awesome if we didn't necessarily try and stand out as a group. A Mexican American Day to me, while maybe to everyone else seems like a really good deal, to me the last thing I want to do is have that be a focus on me and my brothers and sisters. We are Dallasites, we are Texans, we're Americans. And so the sooner that we blend who we are together, I think it'll take us a lot further. That's my individual input. I have no desire to say anything here tonight, but there it is.
Thank you for your input.
Sorry.
One of the conversations that we've had as a working group is more of a timeline that puts it all in perspective. So it kind of gets to what you're talking about. So not just the centennial at one glance, but what is a timeline of Fair Park opening and all those pivotal moments and the histories and Negro Day and Mexican American Day, like in major events and venues that may have happened on Fair Park grounds. So we've even talked as a working group about what does that timeline look like to give us a fuller perspective, right? Not just stands out a history outside of itself, but really puts it into what Fair Park was for the city of Dallas on a continuum, right? Does anybody want to add to that?
One of the things that we deliberated on vigorously when we were on the task force was how do we educate? When we start talking about recontextualization of the Confederacy and to put in perspective what it meant to live and work and play and pray in this city when you are of color. And so to your point, but piggybacking on what Jolie was saying, is that we want to make sure that we tell a comprehensive story. And I understand your concern about speaking specifically about this particular day was for these people, this group of people, these races of people. That is a concern because there was Negro Day, and we learned that there wasn't necessarily Hispanic Day or Mexican American Day. Those persons that were not necessarily African American could go whenever they wanted to. So I understand your point, but I think that this group is really responsible for painting a comprehensive picture and telling the story at a timeline, but also helping people to understand from the Fair Park's perspective, as this gentleman was talking about, the parking lot. That was one of the things that I brought up, is the parking lot and how it expanded and whom was affected. So I don't want you to leave here thinking that we're just going to point out dates, because I understand that concern. But we want to tell a story that paints a picture of what it was to live in the city and what it meant to those persons who wanted to participate in the Fair Park, who were allowed, who may have been disallowed, and what that meant. And so if we tell that story accurately, which I think we're going to do because we spent a lot of time on this, we started this in 2017, I think that we'll be able to help people that come to our city understand what we are acknowledging and how we plan to move forward together, and how we plan to involve all persons in the city future forward.
Right. And not just a history as it relates to what we would consider the majority, but a full history of the people.
Right.
Anyone else? Comments from the floor? Questions? What we need to think about as we're moving forward? Yes, sir.
It's not really a question for us for that, but I was just wondering, was Mr. Mayfield Smith around when the building torn down?
Yes.
Or anything else like that?
He was,
How do you feel about it? I mean, what do you
I
express?
don't know, I just know the history that I was not involved in that. So,
But maybe we
I
should
don't
find
know.
his
I'm
papers
sure
or
we can
something.
find it in the newspaper.
I wonder if his papers went to, Paul Quinn, or that's a great question. There's a high school obviously named after him in a federal building, so maybe there is a collection of papers, I don't know. Okay.
Good question. Anyone else? Questions, things we need to think about as we move this process forward? Are there names that we're not including that we need to specifically reach out to and invite and ask them to come? We'll add another date to our calendar. This is a Tuesday evening at 6:30. Is that typically what's best for everyone, do we think?
What are the other mechanisms that y'all are doing to collect these stories? So are we doing digital outreach, videos, submissions, things of that nature in case people physically can't come out to a session like this? How are you collecting those?
So that's two different things. So this is like, we want to get community voice on what stories we need to include. The actual capturing of those voices, we've been talking, there's a college that we talked to, or?
Well, that'll be part of the interpretive planning.
Yeah.
So,
No, I mean even the listening piece of,
Of
yeah,
who,
of like casting a wider net to hear.
is there a way to
this
put it on
input.
the Cultural Affairs website?
yeah, and I mean, it is. In terms of, I guess we would need to know,
Like
we
even
have not put out a call that they can get I wouldn't say an interview at home, but, in terms of.
No, like thinking when we did the task force in the federal monuments, people were able to email, or what were they
So
doing?
are you thinking they could write it in?
Write it,
Yeah, we could do that.
everybody's got a device and
Okay,
everything.
I'm sorry.
It's a 1 minute video, like
Yeah,
just
I mean,
make it accessible and not,
Okay,
during rush hour on Tuesday.
Have a Facebook page? So can
I won't
this-
watch a video.
these are out there.
I'm probably not gonna watch a video
Right.
in my life, but I did read the email submissions from the task force.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. And if video's easier, I think the main thing is what you're saying is that digital, we didn't give the feedback digitally. I was thinking you were thinking capturing the stories like.
That's what I thought at first.
That's
No,
what I thought.
Yeah, we do have a process for
A
capturing.
way to submit them to, so that people
Submission,
don't have to
yes.
physically be in person. I mean, it could be a Google form, it could be,
Perfect,
it could be a
yes.
myriad of tools.
Got it, yes.
Got it. We wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
The other meeting is on a Saturday. Unfortunately, this election Saturday. But back to your point about scheduling another meeting. I think some people think Saturdays are better. Some people are like, no, people have other things to do on Saturdays. Weeknights seem to be better. We're at y'all's mercy. I mean, tell us what people think. If people have a strong preference. I think Fair Park is really easy actually in the sense that it has free parking. And we have several partner organizations down here that have been really willing to host, and we're talking about Fair Park.
Well, Saturday, May 4th is election day. Perhaps we need to add another Saturday.
Yeah, I'm wondering like the 18th would be 2 weeks later.
Yeah, so that those persons that would be affected.
Why don't we see if we can ask Carl here again, or I can talk to Dr. Harry Robinson. And between the two of them, I'm sure they'll, okay. Does May 18th?
I won't be here, but you all don't need me. I have to work most Saturdays.
You have to work most
So that's-
Saturdays, okay.
That Saturday's out for me. That May 18th is out. The May 4th is open for May 18th.
Okay.
And
I think,
I mean, if we add a digital
Mhm.
opportunity, do we have to show up for another Saturday?
It's just a suggestion.
Let me ask
No,
you
I'm just
this.
saying, like,
Okay,
is it-
so, no, I
do
think
we
that's
have to
fair.
show
So
up in
part of me
person?
also says, let's do the 4th, add the digital. I think there's gonna be some more PR on some of this. And then we can, if we think we need a third one, add a third one.
Okay.
How about
Do we
that?
want to wait till
Yeah.
we see the digital?
Mhm.
Okay. Let's do that.
And another just sidebar comment, I don't know how this event was communicated. Obviously I have a particular lane, so I see things differently than other people do. I don't think the general public knew about this event. And so, that's cause for concern if we're really trying to extract these stories. I don't think the general Dallas public knew about this event.
And a better way would be,
Oh, I don't know how to disseminate it, so I can't.
just give me, you don't, not even like how it was disseminated, give me like the best way to get in front of the general public Dallas would be.
I mean, every media outlet will do a PSA for free for city-related things, so
So I will say we do have, interest in writing an article for the next meeting from the Dallas Morning News. They haven't done it yet, so that is in the works. We worked with the city's public information office to put it out on all the council, PR ways that we publicize public meetings. So, I'm not aware of radio stations that will do the PSAs.
See,
If you
we're-
are,
But
let us know.
the
Yeah,
comment
let
is
us
like,
know.
we're publicizing this as we publicize city meetings.
Right.
That's what it's, and that's missing the mark.
And that's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Facebook works very
When
well.
we did Facebook, yeah.
So, I never saw it on social media at all. And that's not to slight,
Right.
I just didn't see it. The other thing is.
It's also not in your algorithm if it's not on the Office of Cultural Affairs.
Yeah, so there may be another way to handle it. If the city council members will also put it out.
Well, we did all of them, I know.
See, I never saw it.
This is
but
our
I-
DPD struggle too.
I know.
When we give it to the,
I can put it on my little radio show on Facebook. but
Okay,
do it
thank
on the
you.
Black Tuesday. I can also ask Cindy Walker, Dallas Politics,
Perfect.
You gotta get the influencers to publicize.
Yeah.
No, I think
Dr.
this is really
Alexander.
helpful, and again,
Yeah.
with the digital option, we can probably see people from a meeting, I mean, if they
do
don't,
you know how long it would take us to have digital option up and running?
give me a couple days.
Okay.
I mean, I can't swear to March
that's not
Wisconsin break.
hard. Like,
But,
in theory, you could almost just put up a Dropbox
Right.
link and say, share
Yeah.
your file here. There shouldn't be a barrier to the mechanics of, although this is.
For city, I was about to
like I said, give me 2 days.
Shit, you know the city?
Yeah,
It takes forever to update the city website.
because I was actually, Dr. Robinson is having an event for young professionals tonight. So that's the only reason I knew about this was because I hit today and this event popped up.
Right.
And some other people that I know had put interest, so that's the only reason I knew, because otherwise we're supposed to be over there and say, we running it. But this is important
Yeah.
because it's history and it's facts and the things that he was saying. I know some of the things about Maceo Smith, but there was a lot of stuff, and I've been in Dallas all my life, and I've never heard. My brother graduated from Maceo, the high school.
I also want to be clear. These listening sessions aren't it,
Yeah.
right?
But I'm saying, in order for you to get the amount of people with that information and with those stories, to make sure that all of them, even if you did, I know sometimes you do an
What is
ad
the
on
organization
Facebook
we're going to
for a
work
couple of
with?
days, so it hits the whole city.
But we're trying,
Sometimes it's not even
What do you mean the organization?
$950.
The oral history people?
So and it can get a widespread amount of people. But I know it's still collecting information, but to make sure all those key historians.
Yeah, so I was just asking Jennifer,
So a lot of the oral
second part of
histories-
the second part of this is capturing the oral history through the Hall of State processes that capture oral history, right? So that we know who in the room needs to be invited, how, and they have a whole process of, and I think we even talked about utilizing some college students potentially that could go into neighborhoods that have been impacted by Fair Park to talk to people directly.
And
that
remember,
would have
Black
no
Dallas
knowledge.
has been gathering some.
Yeah.
We met with Dr. Keaton,
Yes.
yeah, just last week. So there's a lot of other, this is just one way to capture
Right.
information.
I would say, I went to the Leader Craft birthday celebration.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of craft, I think they call themselves
Craft
craft
kids.
kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you have them down, because a lot of them have some history.
Well, and a lot of those oral histories have actually been captured. Some of them were captured along the way, but we have a little more to do.
Good.
I have
Yes, sir.
My name is Rafael Luna, just so everybody can know who I am. And I have been doing events here at Fair Park for 23 years and staying. My wife, she's passed on. Her name was Cindy Benavides. She was a pioneer in introducing an event, a live event that is called Quinceañeras. And we have a Quinceañera Expo here for 23 years at Fair Park, every year. And we have seen the evolvement of the Latinos and how they used to have the traditional to what it is now, a modern quinceañera that they spend $40,000 on these events. They spend them on their daughters or their family. The whole family comes together and home it. That event has been taking place here at Fair Park for 23 years. In the history that you all are doing, I always say that I'm only fulfilling the legacy that my wife had. We used to work for the Dallas Morning News. We used to work for the magazine La Fuente when we first started all this, and then we transitioned into getting the Dallas Morning News didn't want to do it anymore. We broke off and continued it, but we've been doing it here for 23 years consecutively, year after year after year. And I think that when Cindy passed away, she told me that, she said, when I pass away, I would like for you to make one phone call to Errol McCoy. And I think everybody knows Errol McCoy. Errol McCoy used to be the president of the state of Texas. And tell him that I want to lay in state in one of the buildings at Fair Park.
Wow.
Well, we got married here at Fair Park. My wife and I got married here at Fair Park. And then she died and she laid in state at the Women's Museum because they had a wedding here that she wanted to actually be here. The other event that is very, that I have a legacy is Mundo Latino. And Mundo Latino is the event that the State Fair, it's the Latino exhibit at the State Fair of Texas, doing it also for 23 years.
Wow.
We've been housed, we started out at Discovery Gardens, and then we came over to the Hall of State. Then we went to the Women's Museum, then went to the Science Place, and then went back to the Women's Museum. So I've been in the Women's Museum for the last 5 years, and I just got my letter of approval that that building is still available for State Fair to utilize it for the Latino exhibit for this year. So it's a legacy that I continue, that my wife had a vision.
Okay.
And back then, Latino women were starting out and were very adamant about getting their foot in the door. And once they got in the door, they were wanting to do whatever they can to kind of promote our culture.
Yeah.
And Cindy, always fought for Fair Park. And I've seen the differences from, going from 23 years ago to now. But that's a very different meaning. But I just think that in the stories that you all tell and the legacies you all tell, for a Hispanic woman to have made an impact and been here for so many years, and that tradition and that legacy continues, I think it's a story that's worth to be told.
Understood.
And it is, I don't know if everybody knows the story. Everybody just may know Strategic Events, which is the name of the company, and the Latino. What happens is we are an event company, so we put our name under, but the event is called the Latino Bridal and Kings and Girl Expo.
Okay.
That's the name of the event, and then the other event is called Mundo Latino, a celebration of cultures, and it is based all on the Latino culture. This year, we will be presenting the House of Chocolate. So the Women's Museum will be featuring that for the State Fair of Texas.
Thank you for that. So I just want to be sure that we've captured kind of our action items moving forward. The Saturday, May 4th is still on the calendar. I think the Dallas Morning News is helping to publicize that. Kay sent out the Facebook event and flyer to us via email. And so just being sure that we highlight that all of the board, not even board members, but task force members to share with their networks. A digital Office of Cultural Affairs will work on a way that people around the community can digitally provide their input without fighting traffic and coming here on site in person.
It's cold, I know.
I think we might need to also talk on that about what the process looks like high level. So the community listening session is X. The process of capturing the voices to be included in the history is Y, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, and we were going to discuss this at the next task force meeting. We have asked our boss to basically allow us to go out and hire an interpretive planner at this point.
Okay, good.
So I think it's pending that.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I don't want to say it's going to be 18 interviews for 45 minutes, you know, I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Anything else did it sounds like I captured everything.
Do you have a sign-in sheet? I don't know whether, I want to make sure my email is somewhere.
This is it. I don't know. I don't think your name's on it. So yeah.
No, is that the speaking?
Did Lynn had one? Is this it?
That's it?
That's it. So why don't we get those of you who spoke up or asked questions?
She turned it over back.
Yeah.
Oh.
So let's go ahead and bring this up to speed.
Did I get it all?
Yeah.
Y'all enjoy your young person's shindig at the African American. I might stop by and say hi. I might as well, okay. I felt immediate shame.
I do my job.
All right, friends, thank you all for joining me.
My name is Jenny Logan, and I am from a great Dallas family. I'm a third generation Dallasite. My grandmother, Ruth Shropshire Peak, moved here when she was a baby, and her family has a huge history with this Texas State Fair. So when I saw the outcry for stories, I had to fulfill this. I knew she would love to hear this. Her sister, Edna Shropshire, married a man named Hal Worth, and they ran the Dallas Costume Shop for half a century in Dallas on Main Street. My cousin, David Etherly, is the family historian. He has a history degree as a University of Texas Longhorn graduate. I have to say, he got his degree from A&M, but I have to give him his due because he's really good at what he does. I called him today and asked him to write a brief history for me, as he is the one who collects the Texas history for us, the family history, and along with my cousin James Shropshire. And I'm going to read this because he did such a good job. With the history of our family in the Texas State Fair. And David Etherly wrote, my great uncle Hal C. Worth and great aunt Edna Worth owned Worth Enterprises, which was an entertainment business that worked with Fair Park and the State Fair of Texas for over 60 years. For over 30 years, their business, the Dallas Costume Shop, which my great aunt Edna managed until her death in 1987 at the age of 87, was located just south of Fair Park on Perry Avenue, so they could be close to Fair Park for their business dealings. But it had to move to its current location on Main Street because of the expansion of I-30 in the late 1970s. Among the many things that my great aunt and uncle did for the fair were to supply the music hall with costumes and makeup for its productions from the vast inventory of the Dallas Costume Shop. During the State Fair, they would supply and install all of the lighting in the trees. They would also supply and install all of the flags and the banners during the Cotton Bowl games. Many members of my family also worked in the business and would participate in these activities. The business relationship continued until the Dallas Costume Shop was sold in the late 1990s. During the 1950s to the 1970s, several members of my family would participate in the opening ceremonies of the State Fair. My cousin, Carol Reeves, along with her sisters, Anna, Jerry, and Barbara, would hold the ribbon for the governor to cut for the formal opening of the State Fair. Later, Carol's daughter, Dana, would also have this privilege. These young ladies would also ride on parade floats, supplies to the State Fair by Worth Enterprises. My family has had a long history with Fair Park and the State Fair of Texas as business partners and patrons. And I would like to add that he actually wrote this for me to read because my cousin Carol is his mother. And I want to add from my own perspective, growing up in Dallas, Texas, I enjoyed so many privileges because of the Worth, my great aunt's connections, Edna Worth, doing all these wonderful things for the fair, and her adopted son, Nato Mata, who worked at the costume shop all those years and did all the sewing for all those costumes and flags. We enjoyed so many privileges, behind the scene privileges. We got to go to the fair every year for free. And we felt like we were VIPs at the state fair. And they would point out all those lights and the trees were put up by NATO. And so I just want to let the world know that the Worth family and the Shropshire family were a huge part of the history of the great state Texas Fair. Thank you so much for your organization recording these histories. Can you believe all that?
That's kind of amazing.
My family, okay, and the,
So come a little bit closer. I can see it on my phone now.
okay.
Come in even more. Even more. There you go.
And we're in the Hall of State.
We're in the Hall of State,
And we think
in the
they're-
library.
And we think they're in front of the Hall of State.
Yes, we do.
This is in the 1930s, and they're wearing their cute costumes during the fair. And then this picture is in the early 1960s. These are two sisters and a niece. In the middle, that's my grandmother, Ruth Shropshire Peak. She worked as a milliner at downtown Sanger Harris. This is Edna Shropshire Worth. She owned the Dallas Costume Shop, and she's the one who did all of the banners and the flags for the Texas State Fair. She also had her daughters and granddaughters in the ribbon cutting ceremonies for the Texas State Governor at the opening of the fair every year. And then this is her daughter, Bobby. And they're taking a little joke picture back at the State Fair in one of the photo booths. And I want to thank your organization for taking on such a big task. Thank you.
You're welcome.